Competency-based grading has fast become a very popular way to assess and show growth in schools. Competency-based grading is designed so that students are graded against a set of competencies and given achievement marks rather than a traditional grading system such as A/B that's more a number system. So instead of being given a percentage on a paper, they're going to be given something like you're proficient in the ability to add and subtract fractions, but maybe you're still working on multiplying fractions, so you're at a developing in that competency. And with this system comes new challenges in learning management systems. So imagine that you're a teacher and you've just finished your unit on World War II. And you'd like your students to demonstrate their understanding of the different historical themes that you talked about throughout the unit. You'd like to give your students options so that they can demonstrate their knowledge in a way that's comfortable for them. You give them the option to do a project where they're writing a narrative, or they could choose to design out a world in Minecraft to demonstrate those themes, or create a graphic design. Everything's going really well. You've designed out each of the project strands until you start to post the assignment. Let's take just the writing project, for example. In a competency-based system, this project's going to need both the history competencies as well as the writing competencies. And if I would like those competencies to be honored in their final marks, I'm going to need to create 2 projects just for this one student, both in history and in writing, because those subjects can't communicate with each other. For the student doing graphic design, they're going to need their own assignment as well to represent the art. As you can see, this gets complicated pretty quickly, and there's not a good way to navigate it without creating individually a bunch of different rubrics, really individualized for each student. So how can we solve this? My proposal is to take this problem of inflexible grading system and apply a few fixes that'll make it better. In research, we also saw within this problem, students weren't understanding what these achievement marks really meant, especially on a whole scale of understanding, well, how well am I doing in math? So we're choosing to address those 2 problems: inflexibility in the competency-based grading system and unclear achievement growth visuals for students. Each are not currently addressed in learning management systems. So our approach is to focus on flexibility, especially for the teacher as they put in assignments and projects and grade them, so that they have full flexibility to design their learning experiences however they want and be able to honor the students for the work that they do in each subject. And then on the other side, to have a quick visualization of those achievement levels for students so that the data and the feedback the teachers are given are actually usable and strong feedback for the children to understand and learn where they're at and where they can put energy in to grow. So in order to do this, we created a pool system for final achievement marks, which pool together and connect all classes so that they don't live as separate entities, a flexible grading dashboard, and a pie chart competency visual for students. So let's check these out. On this page, we see a project assignment page. And one of the huge areas of flexibility is because we're doing such, when it have teachers to have such flexibility in what they're creating, this resource section needs to have capabilities to add anywhere from links to documents to even Minecraft worlds. In our work page section, we need the flexibility for whatever other tools such as a OneNote Classroom or a Google Classroom for them to build out those pages and have them directly connected in the learning management system to save them time, save them clicks. And then, of course, our important design focus, that's where we're going to really differ from other learning management systems, is how this rubric is designed. So the first thing that we have is what kind of rubric are we going to add? Because in a competency-based system, we always want to be able to give our students strong feedback, but when we're just learning something new, is it really fair to put in their final grade, their first attempt at something? That's why we've decided to allow for either attaching a formative or a summative rubric, with that formative giving the students the same feedback, but not going into that final end score. So the teacher first gets to decide what kind of rubric, or maybe there's not a rubric on this one, maybe they're just giving written feedback. Or maybe they're adding individual rubrics. That option is there as well. So within this pool system that we talked about, it's going to allow for that interdisciplinary grading, and you could see even that individualized rubric for diverse subjects, so that we're always going back to the pool of subjects. Even if I'm the teacher teaching science and I'm adding some math, they're going to be able to see that math competency that was assessed in the science class within their math section. So what does this look like for the teacher? Well, when the teacher's creating the rubric, you can see here that I have both math and design within this competency. I have options to type here. Sometimes language in competencies is hard for children to understand. So here I could choose to type, well, how do they represent that they are able to solve a unit rate problem? What does that look like for that specific project? I can choose to type there as a teacher, but I also don't have to. It's not required. And the other side is multiple rubric creation. So if we go back to our first example of the teacher with 3 different options, an art, design, and a writing option for the project, the teacher would be able to make 3 rubrics that were ready to go that just switched out some of those competencies that were different than the history competencies. And finally, down here we have that add standard, and you'll see that add standards where we're going to be able to attach our different subjects. And one thing to note, that the design of the pool system, the school administration will be able to decide which classes pool together. So for example, if they want to keep maybe their specialists having their own pool, so your technology, music, art, you may want them pooled separately. So that will be a flexibility that the school will get to choose, just in case they don't want certain subjects to share competencies. Here we have our flexible grading dashboard. And again, going back to flexibility in some of the voice from our users, they wanted to not only be able to type, use emojis in a box, but also to be able to give audio feedback. And we also added voice to text as some of the options, just to give a little bit more flexibility in that student work. Again, common to other learning management systems, you can see different types of documents are coming in as student work, but our highlight huge design difference again is this rubric and how we've designed the rubric section. So if we look at our rubric, we have the rubric that we inputted into our assignment, and so we have multiple subjects, but the core design difference here is this add and remove standard. One thing that really isn't available in learning management systems is the ability to do this quick customization that as I grade, I could either add or subtract. So say I notice that, hey, this student is demonstrating competency in a subject that I hadn't intended to include in this project, but they chose to because they were being creative. I can still honor that and add in that standard. Or let's say students are doing a project and it was a art-focused project, and most of them were painting, so they were in competencies related to painting. But maybe I had a student who made a special request and said, hey, I'd like to demonstrate it this way. And the teacher agreed, like, yes, run with that. So, okay, maybe that competency doesn't fit anymore. We don't want to leave it blank or NA. That tends to concern parents. So I can remove that competency, or the teacher can remove that competency and replace it with one that fits better, which is a really unique design component that's going to give teachers just a lot of flexibility in really honoring their student work. So here we have just some of that customer voice. As we get into the student visualization, that was a frustration among teachers that use competency-based systems. Their students, while they may understand the achievement marks on an individual assignment, really couldn't identify using the learning management system where they were at. So here we have a sketch of what one teacher wanted to start seeing. You'll see a little bit of that in the design. And the other huge pain point was actually point values. that many systems that had adapted to allow for competency-based systems still utilize points. So in this example of mastery, it might still have a 9 attached to it, 10 being exemplary, which actually means like way beyond grade level. But if we have 9 and 10s representing a mastery to kids and parents that are used to an AB system, that sounds like a 90%. And you have to get an E to get 100%, which was not accurate to this achievement system that the school was using. So what does this look like for kids? We designed out a system that you start large with an overview, and then you can cue in for more details. So here we can see a visual charts, and we have a color-coded system. And this system, the light blue is the developing. We're still working on a scale, but making good progress there. Proficient being the lighter green, mastery the darker green, pink being that exemplary, like way beyond grade level. And we can see that this student overall is pretty strong. So let's say we want to zoom into our math. And before we do that, I'll also highlight the student isn't missing any work, but if they were, they just have a small little explanation point with their chart that they could that would just give a quick notification that something was missing. That's the other challenge of competency-based, is it doesn't represent missing work very well because you don't have a mark for that. So it wouldn't come up in the chart. So to make sure that we're not limiting that function, an important thing that both students and parents need to be able to see, if their child happens to be missing a lot of work, we want to make sure that's still represented. All right, so let's dive in and see what does the design look like when we close in on this math. So we can see that it had been broken down into 5 different sections of 5 different types of math. And we can see very quickly the student's really strong in geometry, but statistics and probability is an area that they're still growing a little bit more on. They have a lot more of that blue developing in statistics. And below, we have these broken down by the competencies. So here I could go down, all right, let me look at all my geometry ones. I can see exactly where this student is. In this particular competency, we can see that the student started out in a developing when this competency was first assessed, but eventually grew to proficient and now mastery. And now we can see a very clear visual growth of our student work. And along the side, we have just the meanings of each of these, which is important just as a reference back, especially for parents who aren't thinking about it every day. All right, so with this design, we had a lot of benefits. The flexibility in design, really trying not to limit teachers via the technology, which has been a big problem, and a limitation that changes how they teach, what experiences they provide for their students, as well as that visual communication of growth to help students and parents better understand that achievement competency-based system. But some of the limitations are there was variable grading was not addressed in this design, which was mentioned by a couple of users, and what they mean by that is being able to give a high proficient or a low proficient, and that's something that we feel we would need to do some more research on to see if that truly is a need and how accurately that can be assessed. And then the other limitation being it is a competency-only design. It doesn't align with AB grading, which was designed purposefully so that it limits parents looking for that 100% or students looking for that, but it also does become a challenge in schools that do still feel the need to output a final grade that is in a more traditional model, even though they are using a competency-based system. So these designs allow teachers to have complete flexibility in their work. It creates freedom in assessment and allows students to better understand what that assessment means for them. We believe these design changes will have a big difference in the movement of teachers to transition from very linear subject-based learning to more interdisciplinary project-based learning.